The 410 from dusty plains of Santa Fe arrived in Redemption Gulch like a gasp of steam and a groan of steel. But it wasn't the train that seized the breath of the few idle townsfolk on the platform. It was the woman who stumbled from it. Dressed in clothes too fine for this forgotten spit of land, her face was a canvas of purple and blue, a split lip weeping a single ruby bead of blood. She took 3 faltering steps, her gaze frantic, searching for a deliverance that wasn't there. Then her legs gave way, and she collapsed in a heap of torn silk and desperation on the splintered planks of the station, a broken doll discarded by a cruel master. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with judgment and fear until one man's shadow fell over her. The dust of Redemption Gulch had a personality of its own. It was a fine red grit that coated everything: the clapboard storefronts, the water trough, the souls of the men who lingered too long. It was the dust of failed gold claims and dried-up dreams. Wade Callahan knew the taste of it better than any man. He was leaning against a support beam of the station platform, not waiting for anyone in particular, but simply watching the day bleed out. His hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow, a face that was weathered but kind, with eyes the color of a faded blue sky that had seen too much sun and not enough rain. He saw her the moment the conductor helped her down. She wasn't from a place like this. The dark green silk of her dress, though ripped at the shoulder and stained with grime, spoke of money from cities back east. But it was her face that made his gut clench. He'd seen men after a barroom brawl look better. The bruises were fresh, angry, and stark against her pale skin. One eye was swollen nearly shut. He saw the panic in her good eye, a wild, hunted look he recognized from spooked mustangs. The townsfolk, a loose gathering of store clerks and loafers, stared. He heard the whispers start venomous little currents in the hot afternoon air. "Look at the state of her," muttered Martha, the postmistress. "Must have run afoul of her man." Another man, a drifter named Pike, chuckled darkly. Or her client. Wouldn't be the first. Wade ignored them. His focus was on the woman. He watched her try to stand tall, a futile attempt at dignity that was heartbreaking to witness. She scanned the paltry collection of buildings that made up Main Street, as if expecting a cavalry charge. Finding nothing, the last ounce of her strength seemed to evaporate. Her knees buckled, and she went down without a sound. For a long moment, nobody moved. She was a problem, a piece of trouble delivered by the afternoon train, and no one in Redemption Gulch wanted more trouble. Sheriff Brody, a man whose courage was directly proportional to the size of his paycheck and the safety of the situation, took a hesitant step forward and then stopped, clearly weighing the paperwork against his civic duty. Wade pushed himself off the beam. The jingle of his spurs was the only sound that broke the spell. He walked past the gawking faces, his expression unreadable. He knelt beside the woman, the dust settling on the knee of his worn denim pants. Gently, he brushed a stray strand of auburn hair from her bruised cheek. She was breathing shallowly. Her hands were clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "Sheriff!" Wade's voice was low, but carried a clear authority that Brody, for all his tin star bluster, lacked. "She needs the doc, not your questions." Brody bristled. "Now hold on, Wade. I got procedures. I need to know who she is, what happened." "What happened is, she's hurt." Wade cut him off his gaze, not leaving the woman's face. "The rest can wait." He looked up, his pale blue eyes finally meeting the sheriff's. There was no challenge in them, just a simple, unyielding statement of fact. Brody, a man who knew which fights to pick, grumbled but backed down. Wade looked at the 2 young men from the livery stable who were watching with wide eyes. "You two, give me a hand. Let's get her to Doc Peterson's." They scrambled to help. As Wade carefully positioned himself to lift her shoulders, his fingers brushed against something hard, tucked into the bodice of her dress. It felt like a book, small and leather-bound. A diary, perhaps. It was an intimate detail that seemed at odds with the public violence displayed on her face. He made no sign he'd felt it. Together, they lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, as if she were made more of air and fear than flesh and bone. As they carried her away from the platform, the whispers followed them like flies. Wade didn't look back. He just kept his eyes forward, walking toward the small shingle that read, Dr. M. Peterson, Physician and Surgeon. His mind a whirl of questions he knew better than to ask. He was a rancher, a man who understood the simple calculus of horses and cattle of drought and rain. But he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that by lifting this woman from the dust, he had just invited a storm into his life and into the fragile peace of Redemption Gulch. Doc Peterson was a man whose gentle hands and weary eyes had seen the town through cholera gunshot wounds and the regular hardships of frontier life. He clucked his tongue as they laid the woman on his examination table. Good Lord, Wade, what in heaven's name happened to her? Fell off the train. Doc Wade said the lie smooth and easy. It was a shield for her and for him. The doctor shot him a skeptical look over the top of his spectacles, but didn't press. Right, and I suppose a horse kicked her a few times before she landed. Get me some warm water and clean cloths. As the doctor worked gently cleaning the cuts and examining the bruises, Wade stood by the window looking out at the street. The crowd from the station had dispersed, but he could feel their eyes from behind curtains and in the dark doorways of saloons. This woman was now the town's biggest piece of gossip, a mystery to be dissected and judged over whiskey and sewing circles. Multiple contusions to the face and torso. The doctor muttered, his voice a low hum of professional assessment. Looks like a broken rib on the left side, malnourished, dehydrated. She's been running for a while, I'd wager, and running hard. He paused, dabbing a cut on her forehead. This wasn't a random act, Wade. This was personal, cruel. Wade just nodded, his jaw tight. He knew. The type of man who would do this to a woman wasn't the type to just let her go. He was out there somewhere, and the train tracks only ran two ways. Sooner or later, he'd come looking. Doc Peterson finished his work, bandaging the worst of the cuts and wrapping her ribs. She'll be out for a while yet. I gave her a small dose of laudanum for the pain. She can stay here for the night, but my spare room is little more than a cot. She can stay at my place, Wade heard himself say. The words were out before he'd fully considered them. His ranch was a few miles out of town. It was quiet, isolated. It was safe. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Wade, you haven't had a woman out at that ranch since, well, ever. You sure you want to get involved in whatever this is? Wade thought of the hard object tucked in her dress, of the hunted look in her eye. He thought of the whispers and the leering stares. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who believed some lines shouldn't be crossed. She needs a safe place to land, Doc, Wade said simply. My place is as good as any. As the sun began to set, casting long skeletal shadows across the street, Wade sat by the woman's bedside waiting for her to wake. He didn't know her name, where she was from, or the nature of the devil she was fleeing. He only knew that she had collapsed at the station, and in a town that had turned its back, he had offered a hand. And as the twilight deepened, he had the sinking feeling that he hadn't just offered a hand, but his entire future. The first thing she saw when she woke was the soft, flickering light of a kerosene lamp, painting dancing shadows on a rough-hewn wooden ceiling. The air smelled of pine coffee and something else. Dust and leather. A man's world. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She tried to sit up, but a fiery pain in her ribs stole her breath and forced her back down onto the surprisingly soft mattress with a gasp. "Easy now," a low voice said from the corner of the room. "You're safe." She turned her head, wincing at the pull on her bruised face. A man sat in a simple wooden chair, his silhouette framed against the dark square of a window. He wasn't large, but he had a solidness about him, like an old oak tree that had weathered 100 storms. As her eyes adjusted, she saw the kind, tired face from the station platform, the cowboy who had lifted her from the dust. Where am I?" Her voice was a dry, raspy whisper. "My ranch," he answered, standing up and moving slowly as if not to spook a deer. "A few miles outside Redemption Gulch. The doc fixed you up best he could. Said you need rest." He gestured to a glass of water on the nightstand. "I'm Wade Callahan." She stared at him, her one good eye scrutinizing every line on his face, searching for the cruelty she had come to expect from all men. She found none. Only a quiet concern that felt more foreign to her than the room she was in. "Rosalind." She finally said the name, feeling strange on her tongue. It was her name, but it felt like it belonged to a different woman, one who wore fine dresses without rips and whose face didn't ache with every movement. "Rosalind Pierce." Wade nodded slowly. "Rosalind. It's a pretty name." He didn't press for more. He didn't ask what happened, who did this to her, or why she was on a train to a dead-end town. His lack of questions was a gift, a space for her to breathe. "You hungry? I made some stew. It's not fancy." She was starving. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, subsisting on a stolen apple and stale bread. She managed a weak nod. He helped her sit up his hands, gentle but firm, as he arranged pillows behind her back. The simple act of kindness was so unexpected, it brought tears to her eyes, which she angrily blinked away. Crying was a weakness she could no longer afford. He brought a bowl of rich, savory beef stew and a piece of bread. She ate slowly at first, then with a ravenousness that embarrassed her. Wade didn't seem to notice. He just sat back down in his chair and cleaned a piece of tack, the rhythmic motion of his hands, a calming presence in the quiet room. For 2 days, this was their routine. He would tend to his ranch during the day, and she would rest the silence of the small, clean cabin, a balm on her frayed nerves. He would bring her meals, change her bandages, as Doc Peterson had instructed, and talk to her in that same low, steady voice. He talked about his horses, about the lack of rain, about a stubborn calf that wouldn't take to its mother. He spoke of simple things of life and work, and never once did he ask about the life she had fled. On the 3rd day, she felt strong enough to walk. She shuffled out of the bedroom and into the main room of the cabin. It was one large space, meticulously clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a rifle mounted above it. A small kitchen area, a table and 2 chairs and a worn armchair made up the rest of the furnishings. It was a simple, solitary existence. Wade was at the table mending a bridle. He looked up when she entered, and a small smile touched his lips. "Good to see you on your feet." "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "For everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "Nothing to repay," he said, turning his attention back to the leather strap in his hands. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said, a bitter edge to her voice. "They wouldn't? I saw their faces at the station." He didn't argue. He knew she was right. She walked over to the window and looked out. The landscape was vast and unforgiving, rolling hills of brown grass and rock under an endless blue sky. It was beautiful in its starkness, but it also felt like the edge of the world. A good place to disappear. You're a long way from home, aren't you? Wade asked quietly, his eyes still on his work. The question so gentle undid her. The wall she had so carefully constructed around her heart began to crumble. I don't have a home, she whispered her back to him. Everyone's got a home somewhere, he countered softly. Even if it's just a place they're running from. She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. The time for half-truths was over. This man had shown her a kindness she didn't deserve, and he deserved to know the risk he was taking by sheltering her. My name is not Rosalind Pierce. She began, her voice trembling slightly. My name is Rosalind Cain. Wade stopped his work. He looked up, his gaze steady. He didn't know the name, but he could hear the weight of it in her voice. My husband, she continued, is Garrett Cain. Does that name mean anything to you? Wade thought for a moment, then shook his head. Can't say it does. He's a powerful man in Denver. He owns Mines Land politicians. He owns everything he sees. He thought he owned me, too. The story came tumbling out of her, a torrent of words held back for too long. She spoke of a whirlwind courtship that had quickly soured into a gilded cage. Of Garrett's charm, a veneer that concealed a chilling possessiveness and a terrifying temper. The bruises on her face were his latest, most public masterpiece. I had to leave, she said, her hands twisting in the fabric of the simple cotton dress Wade had bought for her from the general store. I couldn't just walk away. He would have found me. He has men everywhere. I had to have something. Something to make him leave me alone. Leverage! Wade stated understanding dawning in his eyes. She nodded her gaze, darting towards the bedroom where her tattered silk dress was folded. He keeps a ledger, a private one. It's not just about his finances. It details every bribe, every land deed he acquired through threats, every obstacle he had removed. Men who stood in his way, who just disappeared. Wade's face was grim. And you have this ledger. Rosalind took a deep breath. It's small, leather-bound. I've had it sewn into the lining of my corset for a week. It was tucked in my dress when you found me. Suddenly, the weight of his decision on the train platform felt 1,000 times heavier. This wasn't just a woman fleeing a brutish husband. This was a woman who had stolen the secret heart of a very dangerous, very powerful man. A man who would not stop until he got it back. A man who would tear apart a town like Redemption Gulch without a second thought to find it. Why here? Wade asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why Redemption Gulch? There's a name in that ledger, Rosalind explained, her voice dropping. A name connected to a mining claim near here, the Lucky Strike. It was one of Garrett's first acquisitions. The ledger implies the original owner, a man named Patterson, didn't just sell. He was silenced. The witness who signed the deed, transfer, lives, or lived here. A man named... She hesitated, trying to recall the name she had read by candlelight. A man named Brody? The deed was signed by Sheriff Brody. The air in the cabin grew thick and cold. Sheriff Brody, the man with the tin star and the flexible courage. The man who had been so reluctant to help her at the station. It wasn't just caution, it was fear. He knew the name Cain. He knew what it meant. Wade stood up and walked to the fireplace, resting his hand on the cool stone of the mantel. He had invited a storm into his life. He hadn't realized the storm's roots were already in the poisoned soil of the town he called home. He was sheltering a woman who held the key to unlocking a secret that could get them all killed. He'll come for it, Rosalind. Wade said, his back to her. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. "I know," she replied, her voice filled with a desperate resolve. "But when he comes, I won't be just a bruised woman anymore. I'll have the truth. And maybe that's a weapon stronger than his money and his guns." Wade turned to look at her. He saw the fear still lingering in her eyes, but now he saw something else alongside it, a flicker of fire, of a strength she was only just beginning to realize she possessed. He had offered her shelter from the storm. Now it seemed he would have to help her face it. The piece of Wade's ranch was a fragile bubble, and it was burst 4 days later by the arrival of 2 riders. They didn't ride up to the cabin directly. Wade spotted them from the ridge where he was mending a fence line, 2 dark specks moving with purpose across the plains. They weren't cowboys. They rode too stiffly, their horses were too fine, and they carried themselves with the city-bred arrogance of men who believe their authority comes from the wallet of the man who hired them. He watched them ride into Redemption Gulch and head straight for the marshal's office. Wade packed his tools, his movements deliberate and unhurried, but his mind was racing. The vanguard had arrived. Garrett Cain was casting his net. He rode back to the cabin at a steady pace, his face a stony mask. Rosalind was in the yard, scattering feed for a few chickens. The color had returned to her cheeks, and the bruises on her face had faded to sickly yellow-green ghosts of their former selves. She looked up and smiled as he approached, a genuine, unguarded smile that made something ache in his chest. The sight of it only hardened his resolve. "We have company in town," he said, swinging down from his horse. He didn't need to explain. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by the familiar, haunted look. "How do you know they're his?" she asked, her voice tight. "I just know," he said. "Get inside. Stay away from the windows." His instincts were proven right an hour later. Sheriff Brody rode out to the ranch himself, his horse kicking up a plume of anxious dust. Brody didn't dismount a clear sign this was not a social call. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around as if Cain's men might be hiding in the sagebrush. "Wade!" he called out, his voice strained. "Got a moment?" Wade walked out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. "Looks like you do, Sheriff. What's on your mind?" "There's 2 men in town, from Denver, asking questions." Brody said, getting straight to the point. He licked his lips. "They're asking about a woman. Matches the description of the one you picked up at the station." "Is that so?" Wade replied, his tone non-committal. "They say she's the wife of a Mr. Garrett Cain." Brody continued the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. "They say she's unwell, confused, stole some items of sentimental value and ran off. They're very keen to find her for her own safety." "Sentimental value?" Wade repeated the words flat. He glanced toward the cabin where he knew Rosalind was listening. "And you believe them?" Brody's eyes shifted. He couldn't meet Wade's gaze. "It's not my place to believe or disbelieve Wade. Mr. Cain is an important man. These fellas, they made it clear he's offering a reward, a substantial one, $500, for information leading to her safe return. $500. In a town like Redemption Gulch, that was a fortune. It was enough to buy loyalty to turn neighbors into informants. It was enough to get a man killed. "People are talking. Wade," Brody pressed on, his desperation growing. "They remember you carrying her to the dockers. They know you don't get involved in things. It looks suspicious." "What are you saying, Sheriff?" Wade asked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "I'm saying this is trouble you don't want. Cain's reach is long. Just tell me she's not here, Wade. Give me something I can tell them so they'll move on." Brody was pleading not as a lawman, but as a man terrified of a ghost from his own past. He was thinking of the ledger of his own signature on a crooked deed. Wade stared at the sheriff for a long, hard moment. He saw the fear, the weakness, the self-preservation that trumped any notion of duty. The only person I've got here is my cousin from up north, visiting for her health. Wade said the lie coming easily. She's frail, not fit for travel or visitors. Brody seized on the flimsy story with pathetic gratitude. Right, your cousin. I'll tell them they must be mistaken. But Wade, be careful. These aren't just ranch hands. One of them a man named Colum. He's got eyes like a snake. They won't give up easy. With that, the sheriff wheeled his horse around and galloped back toward town, fleeing the ranch as if the devil himself were at his heels. Inside, Rosalind leaned against the wall, her face pale. $500, she whispered. He's trying to buy the whole town. He's trying to smoke you out, Wade corrected her. Make it so there's nowhere left for you to hide. The next few days were a war of nerves. Wade didn't go into town, but he didn't need to. The town came to him. First it was Jed, the young hand from the livery, who rode out on the pretense of delivering a bag of oats Wade hadn't ordered. He asked awkward, prying questions about Wade's cousin, his eyes constantly straying to the cabin. Wade sent him away with a polite but firm dismissal. Then came Martha, the postmistress, claiming to have a letter that had been misaddressed. She tried to peer past him into the house, her face a mask of cloying concern. I just worry so, Wade. A sick relative is such a burden. Each visitor was a probe, a test. Wade knew that Cain's men, Colum and the other one, were sitting in the saloon, buying drinks, listening to the whispers and tightening their net. The reward money had poisoned the well. The quiet respect the townspeople had for Wade was being eroded by greed and fear. He and Rosalind were on an island, and the tide was rising. One evening, as they sat in tense silence, Rosalind finally broke. This isn't fair to you, Wade. You should take me to the sheriff. Let them have me. Maybe if he gets the ledger back, he'll let me live. Wade looked at her, at the defeat in her eyes. You believe that? He asked softly. You think a man like Garrett Cain, a man who would beat you like that, would just let you go? That ledger isn't just leverage, Rosalind. It's your death warrant. You know too much. Whether he gets it back or not, he can't afford to have you breathing. So what do we do? She cried, her voice cracking. We can't stay here forever. They'll keep pushing, and soon, someone in that town will sell their own mother for $500, let alone me. Wade stood and walked to the fireplace, taking the rifle down from its mount. He checked the action, his movements calm and practiced. We don't have to stay here forever. Just long enough. Long enough for what? He turned to face her, the heavy rifle resting in the crook of his arm. That ledger has more than just Brody's name in it, right? She nodded. It has names of senators, judges, businessmen in Denver. It details everything. Then that's our weapon, Wade said, a new hardness in his voice. Cain thinks he can use money and fear to isolate us. He thinks he's the only one who can apply pressure. He's wrong. He looked at the ledger which she had retrieved, and now kept in a small wooden box. We need to get a message out, not to the law here, but to someone in Denver. Someone whose name is not in that book. A rival newspaper editor, an honest marshal, anyone who would love to see Garrett Cain fall. It was a desperate gamble. To get a message to Denver would mean trusting someone sending a rider through country that Cain's men were likely watching. Who can we trust? Rosalind asked. Everyone in this town is ready to sell us out. Wade thought for a moment. His mind sifted through the faces of Redemption Gulch, discarding the fearful, the greedy, the weak. One face remained. Doc Peterson, he said finally. He's a man of science, a man of principle. He values life more than money, and he's seen firsthand what Cain did to you. If there's one man in this town who will help, it's him." The plan was simple and deeply dangerous. Rosalind would write a letter vague enough not to be incriminating if intercepted, but specific enough for the intended recipient to understand. Wade would ride into town under the cover of darkness and get it to the doctor. That night, as a sliver of moon hung in the inky sky, Wade saddled his horse. Rosalind handed him the sealed envelope and the small, heavy ledger now wrapped in oilcloth. "Don't take the book unless you have to," she said, her voice filled with worry. "The letter is the priority, but if something happens, if you can't come back, give this to the doctor. Tell him to find a way. Don't let it have all been for nothing." He looked down at her, at the woman who had crashed into his life and overturned it completely. He saw the fire in her eyes again, brighter than ever. "I'll be back," he said. It was a promise. He slipped the ledger into his saddlebag and the letter into his coat pocket. Riding into Redemption Gulch felt like riding into the belly of a beast. The lights of the saloon spilled onto the street, and he could hear the tinny notes of a piano, punctuated by loud laughter. He saw Colum, the snake-eyed man, standing on the saloon's porch, smoking a cheroot, his gaze sweeping the street. Wade guided his horse into the dark alley behind the doctor's office, his heart pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a conspirator, a man moving against a king. And in the silent, watchful dark of Redemption Gulch, he knew the storm was no longer gathering. It was about to break. Wade moved through the alley with the quiet grace of a predator, the shadows his only allies. He tethered his horse where it couldn't be seen from the street and crept to the back door of Doc Peterson's office. He knocked softly, a specific rhythm they had agreed upon long ago for emergencies. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. The door opened a crack, and the doctor's weary face appeared. "Wade, thank God. Get in quickly." The office was dark, save for a single lamp turned down low. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Doc Peterson looked as if he hadn't slept in days. "They've been here," the doctor said, his voice a low whisper. "Colum, the quiet one. He came by this afternoon. Not asking questions, just observing. He wanted to know what medicines I'd been using lately. If I'd had any unusual patients." He wrung his hands. He knows Wade, or he suspects strongly. "I know, Doc. That's why I'm here." Wade pulled the letter from his coat. "Rosalind wrote this. It's to a newspaper editor in Denver, a man named Philip Larson. He's known for being a rival of Cain's. The letter mentions evidence of Cain's business practices. It asks Larson to send a trusted agent here, discreetly." The doctor took the letter, his hand trembling slightly. "How am I to get this to Denver? The telegraph office is watched. Every man on the stagecoach is being scrutinized." "I have a nephew who works as a freight driver," the doctor said, after a moment's thought. "Frank, a good lad. He's not from this town. He just passes through on his run to Carson City. He's due tomorrow. He could take it. Cain's men are focused on people coming from Denver, not going out." "It's a risk, Doc," Wade said gravely. "Life is a risk." Peterson counted a flicker of defiance in his tired eyes. "That woman. What was done to her is an affront to decency. I'll not stand by and let fear dictate my conscience." He looked at Wade. "What else?" Wade hesitated, then pulled the oilcloth-wrapped ledger from his coat. "This is the source. The evidence. I want you to have it. Hide it. If anything happens to me or Rosalind, this is all that's left." The doctor's eyes widened as he felt the weight of the small book. "My God, Wade. Do you know what you're asking?" I know. I'm asking you to be the last line of defense." Doc Peterson stared at the ledger, then at Wade. He gave a slow, solemn nod. "I have an old, hollowed-out medical text. Gray's Anatomy. No one will look for it there. It will be safe." A wave of relief washed over Wade. The burden was now shared. As he turned to leave, the front door of the doctor's office rattled. A loud, authoritative knock echoed through the small building. "Dr. Peterson," a voice called out. It was smooth, cultured, but laced with steel. It was a voice used to being obeyed. "Open up. I'm told you're a man who tends to the town's strays." The doctor froze, his face ashen. "It's him," he mouthed silently to Wade. "Garrett Cain." Wade's blood ran cold. Cain wasn't supposed to be here yet. He was moving faster than they'd anticipated. He pressed himself into the deepest shadows of the back room as the doctor, composing himself with a visible effort, went to open the door. Garrett Cain filled the doorway. He was handsome, in a severe, predatory way, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light around it. His hair was silver at the temples, and his eyes, a piercing, intelligent grey, swept the room, missing nothing. Behind him stood the snake-eyed Column and another broad-shouldered thug. "Mr. Cain," the doctor said, his voice commendably steady. "This is a late hour for a call. Forgive the intrusion, Doctor." Cain said, his voice a silken threat, as he stepped inside his men remaining on the porch. "I am in search of my wife. I have it on good authority that a woman fitting her description was brought to you injured several days ago. As I told your man Column, I see many people." The doctor demurred. "Patient confidentiality is a cornerstone of my profession." Cain smiled, a chilling expression, devoid of any warmth. "Let us dispense with the formalities. My wife, Rosalind, is a fragile creature prone to flights of fancy. She has taken something that belongs to me. A family heirloom." His eyes bored into the doctor's. "I want her back, and I want my property. The $500 reward is now 1,000 for her, and another 1,000 for the return of my heirloom. No questions asked." He let the figure hang in the air, a staggering sum that could buy the soul of Redemption Gulch 10 times over. "I assure you, Mr. Cain, if such a person were in my care, I would be obligated to contact the authorities," Doc Peterson said. Cain's smile widened. "Doctor, in this part of the world, I am the authority. Now." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "I'm a reasonable man, but my patience has its limits. My men will be staying in town. They will be visiting with your neighbors, your friends. They will be reminding everyone of the benefits of cooperation." He turned his gaze toward the back of the office, as if he could sense Wade's presence in the shadows. "And the consequences of obstruction. Good evening, Doctor." With that, he turned and was gone, leaving a palpable chill in his wake. The doctor leaned against the door, his face slick with sweat. "He's not just casting a net, Wade. He's bought the town. He's turning it into his own private hunting ground." Wade knew what this meant. He couldn't go back to the ranch. Cain's men would be watching the roads. They were trapped. Rosalind, Wade said, his mind racing. "She's alone out there. They won't move on her yet." The doctor reasoned, his mind clicking back into a logical rhythm. "He'll want to be sure. He'll want you. He'll try to draw you out. The ranch is the bait." "There's an old line cabin," Wade said, thinking fast. "North of my property. It's abandoned, half collapsed, but the storm cellar is solid. If I can get back, I can move her there. They'll never find it." "How will you get past them?" "They'll be watching the main road. I'll go through the Badlands. It's rough country, but I know it better than they do." Wade's jaw was set. "Doc, get that letter to your nephew. It's our only hope now." And hide that book like your life depends on it." "It does," Peterson said grimly. "All our lives do." Wade slipped out the back door and into the darkness. The ride back to his ranch was a nightmare of stealth and caution. He avoided trails cutting through treacherous ravines and thick scrub, his horse's hooves muffled on the soft earth. Twice he saw the distant glow of a cheroot from riders positioned on the ridges watching his property. Cain had surrounded him. His ranch wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage. He reached the cabin just before dawn, entering through a back window he'd left unlatched. Rosalind was asleep in the chair by the cold fireplace, a shotgun laid across her lap. The sight sent a pang through him. This was what Garrett Cain had reduced her to. He gently touched her shoulder. She woke with a start, her eyes wide with terror, before recognizing him. "Wade, I was so worried. I heard riders." "It's Cain," he said, quickly keeping his voice low. "He's here, in town. We have to leave, now." There was no time for questions. He grabbed a canteen, a blanket, and the box of ammunition from the mantelpiece. He led her out the back of the cabin and into the pre-dawn gloom. They moved on foot, sticking to the low ground, every rustle of a bush, every snap of a twig, sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. The line cabin was 2 miles away, a dilapidated wreck, half swallowed by the earth. But as Wade had said, the stone-lined storm cellar was intact. He pulled open the heavy wooden doors, revealing a dark, musty-smelling hole. "In here," he commanded. "It's not much, but it's safe. Stay here no matter what you hear. Don't come out, not for anything. Do you understand?" She looked at the dark space, then back at his grim face. She nodded, her fear warring with her trust in him. "What are you going to do?" "Cain wants to play a game," Wade said, his eyes hard as flint. "He's turned my home into bait. He's sitting in his castle in town, waiting for the peasant to come to him. Fine. It's time to show the king that the board is bigger than he thinks." He helped her down into the cellar, handed her the shotgun and the blanket. "I'll be back for you." As he closed the heavy doors over her, plunging her into darkness, Wade Callahan felt a profound shift within himself. He was no longer just protecting a woman. He was fighting for his land, his life, and for the soul of a town that was about to be devoured by a monster. Garrett Cain had laid a siege. Now Wade would start a war. He checked his own revolver, the cold steel a comforting weight in his hand, and melted back into the landscape, a ghost in his own territory. The sun rose over Redemption Gulch, not with the promise of a new day, but as a spotlight on a stage set for violence. Garrett Cain had made the town's only hotel his fortress. Colum and his other men patrolled the street with an air of ownership, their presence a suffocating blanket of fear. The $1,000 bounty was on everyone's lips, a devil's whisper, turning good neighbors suspicious and weak men dangerous. Wade didn't go near the town. Instead, he used his intimate knowledge of the surrounding territory as a weapon. He started a small rock slide in the canyon east of town, blocking the main supply road. He spooked the horses at the livery, sending half of them scattering into the hills, forcing Cain's men to waste hours rounding them up. They were minor acts of sabotage pinpricks designed to frustrate and unnerve. He was a ghost in the machine, making the gears grind. From a high rocky perch, he watched the town through his field glasses. He saw Cain exit the hotel, his handsome face contorted in a mask of controlled fury. He was a king whose castle was being rattled by an unseen peasant, and he didn't like it. Wade's strategy was working. He was pulling Cain's focus, making him angry. An angry man makes mistakes. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the cellar, Rosalind fought her own battle against fear and despair. The shotgun was heavy in her lap, a cold, unfamiliar burden. Every sound from outside, the cry of a hawk, the wind whistling through the ruined cabin above, was a potential threat. To fight the encroaching panic, she focused on the ledger. She had spent hours studying it, memorizing the names, the dates, the coded transactions. She knew it was more than a list of crimes. It was a map of Garrett Cain's soul charting his greed and his cruelty. And in its pages, she had found his greatest vulnerability. It wasn't a crime. It was a secret. A page near the back detailed payments made for years to a sanitarium outside of Philadelphia. The payments were for a G. Carter, but the notes in the margin, written in Cain's own arrogant script, made the truth clear. Garrett Cain was not his real name. He was Garrett Carter, the son of a disgraced con man who had died penniless. His entire empire, his name, his reputation, was built on a lie, a desperate attempt to escape the shadow of his father's failure. For a man obsessed with power and legacy, the public revelation of his humble, shameful origins would be a fate worse than prison. It would make him a fraud. Back in Redemption, Gulch Cain's frustration boiled over. He stormed into the sheriff's office. "This rancher, this Callahan!" He snarled at Brody. "He's making a fool of me. I want him. I want him found." "My men are looking," Brody stammered, sweating under Cain's icy glare. "But the land out here, it's his." "Then we force him out," Cain declared. He strode to the door and addressed Colum. "Go to the Callahan ranch. Take 2 men. I don't care what's left of it, but by sunset, I want it to be a pillar of smoke that can be seen from 10 miles away. Let him watch his world burn. Then he will come to me." Wade saw the 3 riders heading for his ranch. He saw the smoke, first a thin, grey tendril rising into the pristine blue sky, and his heart clenched. Everything his father had built, everything he had maintained, was turning to ash. The anger that rose in him was cold and pure. Cain wanted to burn his world. Wade would bring the fire to him. He circled around, using the cover of the hills, and approached the storm cellar. He opened the doors. Rosalind looked up, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "They're burning the ranch," he said, his voice flat and hard. "I know. I saw the smoke," she replied. She held up the shotgun. "What now? Do we run?" "No," Wade said. "No more running. Not for you, not for me." He looked at her, seeing not a victim, but a survivor. A partner. Cain thinks he's won. He thinks I'll come for him blind with rage and walk into his trap. He's half right. I am going for him, but not blind. He paused. "Can you use that thing?" She looked down at the shotgun. "Wade, I've never fired a gun in my life." "Good," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Because your weapon isn't a gun." He looked her in the eye. "It's your voice." Their plan was desperate, bordering on suicidal, but it was all they had. As dusk settled, Wade Callahan walked down the center of Main Street. He didn't sneak. He didn't hide. His revolver was holstered at his hip. His face was a mask of grief and fury. He walked toward the hotel, a lone figure against the backdrop of his burning ranch, a distant angry scar on the horizon. Townsfolk peeked from their windows, their faces pale. This was it. The final act. Colum and another of Cain's men stepped out of the saloon to block his path. "That's far enough, rancher," Colum sneered. "Mr. Cain is waiting for you inside." Wade didn't stop walking. "I'm not here to see him. I'm here to kill him." His speed was deceptive. Before Colum could fully register the threat, Wade drew his revolver. The street exploded with the roar of a gunshot. But Wade hadn't aimed at Colum. He fired at the wooden sign of the saloon just above Colum's head, sending splinters showering down. The move was pure misdirection. As Colum flinched, Wade lunged forward, not with his gun but with his fists. He slammed the heavy steel barrel of his revolver into the other man's jaw, sending him crumpling to the dust. Colum, recovering his senses, drew his own weapon. But Wade was already on him, grappling, turning the fight into a brutal close-quarters brawl. It was the distraction they needed. While all eyes were on the fight, a second figure emerged from the alley beside the general store. It was Rosalind. She wasn't dressed as a victim. She wore the simple cotton dress Wade had bought her, but she carried herself with the righteous fury of an avenging angel. In her hand, she held not a gun, but a single folded piece of paper. She walked onto the porch of the marshal's office, putting her directly across the street from the hotel. "Garrett Carter!" She screamed, her voice ringing out sharp and clear, cutting through the sounds of the brawl. The name stopped everyone cold. Wade smashed his elbow into Colum's face and kicked him away, creating a space. In the doorway of the hotel, Garrett Cain appeared, his face a thundercloud. The name, his real name, had struck him like a physical blow. "What did you say?" he hissed, his composure finally cracking. "I said Garrett Carter," Rosalind shouted again, unfolding the paper. It was a page she had carefully copied from the ledger. "Son of a failed swindler from Philadelphia, I have your ledger, Garrett. The real one. And a copy of this page is already on its way to the Denver papers with a letter. It was a bluff, but a powerful one. Doc Peterson's nephew was their only real hope. But in this moment, conviction was everything. The townsfolk, drawn out by the commotion, stared, their minds racing. The great and powerful Mr. Cain was a fraud. "I know about the sanitarium," Rosalind pressed on her voice, shaking but resolute. "I know about the shame you've been running from your whole life. You built this empire of dirt and blood to hide the fact that you're nothing but the son of a cheap con man." It was a masterful stroke. She hadn't accused him of murder or bribery. She had attacked his pride, the very foundation of his identity. In the world of powerful men he inhabited, being revealed as a liar, a man of base origins, was a mortal wound. Cain stared at her, his face a terrifying mask of pure hatred. His reputation was unraveling before his eyes on a dusty street in a meaningless town. He lost control. With a roar of pure rage, he drew a small silver derringer from his coat pocket and fired at Rosalind. But Wade was ready. The moment Cain's arm moved, Wade fired his own revolver. The two shots sounded almost as one. Cain's shot went wide, splintering the wood next to Rosalind's head. Wade's shot was true. It caught Cain in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing him to drop his weapon. Silence descended, thick and absolute, broken only by Cain's pained gasps. Colum, seeing his master fall and his power evaporate, made a split-second decision. He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Sheriff Brody, galvanized into action for the first time by the sight of the mighty Cain bleeding in the dust, finally drew his weapon. "It's over, Cain," he said, his voice trembling but firm. He had been given a way out, a chance to redeem himself, and he was taking it. Wade walked over to where Cain was slumped against the hotel wall, clutching his shoulder. He didn't look at Cain. He looked at Rosalind, who was standing tall and trembling on the marshal's porch. She had done it. She had faced her monster, and with nothing but the truth, had brought him down. Doc Peterson came rushing forward with his medical bag, a grim satisfaction on his face as he looked at his new patient. The spell was broken. Garrett Cain was just a man bleeding, and exposed his power nothing more than a ghost. Wade walked over to Rosalind. He gently took the shotgun from her nerveless fingers. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. The fear was gone. "You were right, Wade," she whispered. "The truth is a stronger weapon. He looked at her, then at the town, then at the smoking ruin of his ranch on the horizon. Everything had changed. The dust was settling, and in the quiet aftermath, something new was beginning. It wouldn't be easy. The ashes of his home were a testament to that. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a foregone conclusion. It felt like a choice, their choice. That single dramatic confrontation in the dusty street of Redemption Gulch wasn't just an end, but a beginning. With Garrett Cain's empire of lies exposed, the full contents of his ledger delivered safely by Doc Peterson's nephew caused a scandal that rocked Denver to its core. Powerful men fell, and the name Cain or Carter became a curse. Back in Redemption Gulch, the town, having stared into the face of its own greed and fear, was forever changed. It found a new, quieter kind of pride. Wade rebuilt his ranch not just with timber and nails, but with the help of Rosalind, who found her true home not in a city penthouse, but under the vast, open skies of the West. Their story became a local legend, a testament to the fact that courage isn't about the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. It's a reminder that true strength is often found in the quiet resolve of ordinary people pushed to extraordinary limits. If their story of resilience and redemption moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a tale of true grit. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories from the untamed heart of history. Thank you for listening.